I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow.
Prince Harry had prepared himself for another cold message from the palace. He had not prepared for his mother's handwriting to return from the shadows. Inside a restricted crown file was an authentication memorandum confirming that Diana had deposited a sealed letter specifically for her younger son, with instructions tied to a future rupture between the brothers. When Harry understood why the document had surfaced now, he stopped speaking, and everyone in the room knew the past had just become dangerously present. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Harry stared at the date stamped beneath the reference number, December 1996. The memorandum stated in unmistakable terms that Diana had entrusted a sealed letter to the Royal Archive, a collection where sensitive family records were preserved under controlled access. Her condition was painfully specific. The message could be released if her younger son became estranged from William and stepped away from royal life. Decades before that fracture became public, his mother had feared it was coming. A retired archivist had carried the copy into the meeting alongside an independent solicitor, whose account confirmed how it had been recovered. Harry checked the archival number, the description of Diana's wax seal, and signatures in the chain of custody, the record showing who had controlled the file. Each detail made denial harder. Meghan watched his fingers tighten around the page. She called his name once, then again, but he remained frozen as the release condition described the life he was living, with terrifying precision. Harry turned the sheet and found William listed as a secondary beneficiary. Hurt replaced disbelief. If his brother was named in Diana's instructions, had the future king already read them? Had the palace allowed one son to understand their mother's warning, while leaving the other in darkness? Meghan urged him to breathe, yet he could only stare at the line that seemed to place William inside a secret Harry believed belonged to him. Then the memorandum delivered its sharpest blow. 3 days earlier, the original letter had been removed from its archive location under the king's authority. Charles had signed the transfer, but no explanation appeared beside his name. Beneath it, a handwritten notation identified another enclosure. For William, only after Henry has read the first. Diana had not left a farewell. She had created a reckoning. Harry set the copy down and made one demand. He wanted the original letter placed before him, unopened and uninterpreted. But before he could reach Diana's words, he would have to confront the 3 people with the most to lose from them. Understood. For all upcoming sections, I'll prioritize fast delivery. Slight variation above or below the target word count is acceptable, while all your storytelling, character, terminology, sourcing, paragraph, and continuity rules will remain in place. The document did more than reopen an archive. It reopened the defining wound of Harry and William's lives. Both men had spent years invoking Diana's memory, yet they had arrived at painfully different versions of what loyalty to her meant. Now her own words waited between them. Charles feared the letter might condemn the institution he had inherited, while Meghan feared it could pull her husband toward a family from which he had fought to escape. Harry could not separate his mother from the choices that had defined his adult life. Her memory shaped his departure, his public testimony, and his belief that leaving royal duties had been necessary to protect his family. Those duties meant the official appearances and charitable responsibilities performed on behalf of the monarch. If Diana's letter challenged his understanding of that decision, then it threatened more than his anger. It threatened the story that had helped him survive. William carried a different burden. He stood beside a window at Windsor, while Catherine watched him reread the memorandum's summary, each line tightening his expression. The future king had spent years balancing private grief against the demands awaiting him. He feared that one sentence from Diana could be removed from its emotional context and turned into a public weapon against the crown. The monarchy as a continuing institution, separate from any single person. Catherine asked what he remembered. The prince answered quietly that their mother had once promised to leave each son something no courtier could edit. She heard the fear beneath his restraint. Meghan saw disbelief harden into anger thousands of miles away. She warned Harry that another palace-controlled process could force him back into the same silence he had escaped. The Duchess understood why he wanted the letter, but she also feared what reopening that door might cost their marriage and peace. He refused to retreat. Walking away now, he told her, would feel like abandoning Diana for a second time. Charles soon asked William to meet privately, with no aides recording their words. The king revealed during that conversation that he had known Diana deposited personal material, yet he had never been told about a conditional letter addressed to their younger son. He then produced a documented account from the archive's former custodian. That record confirmed the memorandum had surfaced only because the custodian secretly sent a copy beyond palace control, fearing the original would be permanently reclassified, officially sealed away under a stricter access category. One name changed the room. William found it on the old custody sheet and immediately called Harry. The signature belonged to Diana's former equerry, a trusted royal aide who had witnessed her deposit. That same witness had later approved the action that concealed it. To understand his decision, the brothers would have to return to the winter evening, when Diana decided ordinary family promises were no longer enough. The secret letter was not born from vague anxiety. It followed one precise and painful incident. An evening when Diana watched her sons leave a private family meeting in opposite directions, each believing he had to protect the other alone. That moment convinced her that royal duty might one day divide the boys more effectively than scandal ever could. Before midnight, she contacted a trusted legal advisor and began creating a message designed to survive both her absence and the palace's silence. Diana entered December 1996, carrying a fear she could no longer dismiss. Her formal separation from royal life had created competing households, the separate offices, staff, and advisors surrounding different members of the family. William was already being prepared for the responsibilities of a future king, while Harry was learning to protect his brother, without fully understanding what that sacrifice might demand. She feared those expectations would not merely separate their paths. They would force the boys into opposing emotional roles. One afternoon changed everything. William sat through a tense tea at Kensington Palace and told his mother that protecting the monarchy might someday require him to hide his feelings. The institution he meant was the crown, the continuing system of royal duty and authority he would eventually inherit. Harry immediately answered that if his older brother had to protect it, then he would protect William. Neither boy understood how much those promises frightened Diana. One son was preparing to surrender himself to duty. The other was preparing to surrender himself for his brother. Silence followed. Harry left through one door, while the future king walked through another without speaking to him. Diana remained at the table and slowly turned over two untouched cups. She suddenly understood that both boys had begun treating love as a burden proved through sacrifice. Sadness hardened into resolve. If she could not control the pressures surrounding them, she could leave words those pressures could not rewrite. Diana contacted her solicitor that evening and dictated strict custody instructions during a recorded conversation. She chose a sealed archival deposit rather than an ordinary note because it provided proof of authenticity, a documented custody trail, and protection against either son receiving the message before the crisis she feared arrived. No monarch, private secretary, or communications advisor could summarize the letter before Harry read it. A private secretary was the senior official who managed royal business and sensitive correspondence, making that restriction especially powerful. The equerry, witnessing the deposit, later preserved the moment in a signed account. That royal aide recorded how Diana finished the first envelope, paused, and then demanded a second. She asked him one haunting question. What happens if they begin speaking about each other instead of to each other? Years later, the same witness discovered that the archive code had been quietly altered. The letter was disappearing behind palace control. Diana's warning had come true, and Harry was about to enter a room where every buried grievance would finally have a voice. There were no cameras, aides, or prepared statements when Harry walked into the private Windsor library. William was already waiting beside the sealed archive box, his hands resting flat against the table. For several seconds, neither brother moved. Then Harry asked the question that had consumed him since the memorandum appeared. How long did you know? William's answer did not calm the room. It exposed a deeper betrayal, one built not on knowledge, but on years of mutual suspicion. Harry had agreed to enter Windsor under strict conditions. There would be no press briefing, no recording, no communications staff, and no discussion beyond the immediate family until an independent specialist confirmed the file's authenticity. A press briefing was a controlled meeting where palace officials shaped what information reached the public, and he refused to let that machinery touch Diana's words. William had accepted every demand. He had also ordered the archive box to remain closed until they decided together whether their mother's release condition had truly been met. The silence broke violently. Harry accused his brother of allowing the palace to bury Diana's message while presenting loyalty as an excuse. William pushed his chair back and insisted he had discovered the letter only days earlier. The prince had known personal material existed, but not that one envelope had been written for his younger brother. Harry did not believe him. Years of distance had made even the truth sound rehearsed. William struck back. He accused Harry of turning private memories into global arguments and forcing the family to defend grief that should never have become public property. The Duke answered that silence had once made him feel trapped, powerless, and erased. Speaking had been his way of surviving. William called restraint his own form of survival. The realization landed painfully. Each brother had mistaken the other's defense against suffering for deliberate betrayal. Then William placed a sealed statement on the table. The retired equerry had provided the documented account, confirming that a senior courtier changed the letter's classification after Diana's death. Classification meant the official access level controlling who could see a sensitive record. The witness stated that the alteration was justified as necessary to prevent the message from destabilizing both heirs. Yet the equerry now believed protection had become concealment. Harry studied the attached custody sheet and found Charles's recent transfer authorization beneath the older notation. Anger returned instantly. He accused the king of moving the letter before either son could reach it. The locked door opened. Charles entered alone, heard the accusation, and did not defend himself. The monarch placed a small brass key between his sons and revealed through a recorded private statement why he had transferred the box. His authority had never been the true barrier. A protection order created before he became king still controlled the envelope. Diana's letter was finally within reach. But opening it meant defeating a system built to protect the crown from her unfiltered voice. The king possessed the key, but not unrestricted power. Diana's letter sat behind a legal barrier created by trustees who believed private grief could become a constitutional threat. In a narrow council room, Charles listened as the archive custodian explained that opening the envelope without unanimous consent could invalidate its protected status. The monarch's expression hardened. For once, preserving the institution and honoring the mother of his sons demanded opposite decisions, and everyone waited to see which duty he would choose. Charles placed the brass key on the table, but kept his hand beside it. The archive custodian explained that Diana's letter was governed by a private custody agreement, a binding arrangement controlling who could hold, open, or release sensitive material. It was not a constitutional decree, meaning it did not carry the force of an official command, affecting the powers of the crown. Even so, 3 custodians had to approve the release: the monarch, Diana's designated legal representative, and the senior archive trustee, responsible for protecting restricted records. The safeguards had once served a noble purpose. They were intended to prevent manipulation, premature publication, and selective quotation of a grieving mother's words. Yet those same protections had given later officials the power to delay the letter long after its release condition was fulfilled. Every locked door had been defended as caution. Every delay had been described as protection. Together, they had created silence. Charles listened without interrupting. Then he removed his glasses and admitted that institutional caution had repeatedly deepened his son's pain. The king had believed control could prevent another public wound, but control had only taught Harry to expect concealment and William to fear disclosure. His remorse did not erase the damage. It did, however, explain why he had brought both sons into the room. William wanted the letter opened privately and kept confidential. The prince feared that Diana's most intimate words could be reduced to headlines, stripped of tenderness, and used against either brother. Harry demanded an independent witness. The Duke warned that one missing page or unexplained mark would destroy the little trust remaining between them. Neither man moved. Their mother's message stood inches away, yet suspicion still occupied the space between them. The archive trustee finally broke the deadlock through a documented disclosure. Charles had transferred the box to stop an internal committee from extending its classification, the restriction controlling access, for another 25 years. What Harry had seen as concealment had actually been the monarch's attempt to force its release. Diana's legal representative then produced the original clause. It defined estrangement with chilling precision: prolonged separation, public accusation, and communication conducted mainly through intermediaries. Every condition had been met. 3 signatures followed. The key turned. Inside the box, the brothers found Diana's envelope and a short cassette recording. The palace had lost control. Then their mother's voice began, shattering every defense in the room. The tape began with a breath, a faint movement, and then Diana's unmistakable voice addressing her boys together. Harry lowered his eyes. William stopped turning the sealed letter in his hands. She did not predict titles, exile, interviews, or public warfare. She spoke about fear, the fear that powerful people would someday persuade each son that the other had chosen duty over love. By the time the recording ended, neither brother could hide behind his old certainty. Charles remained silent as the archive custodian checked the cassette against Diana's written custody instructions. Its archival seal, the numbered mark proving that an item entered protected storage without being altered, matched the record created in 1996. The tape was not a substitute for the letter. It was a brief introduction, intended to preserve her tone, preventing future officials from twisting tenderness into accusation or presenting fear as anger. Diana's recorded message carried no judgment against the monarchy and no blueprint for either son's future. She did not tell William to reject the crown, the institution representing the monarch's authority and continuing duties. She did not ask Harry to spend his life fighting it. Instead, their mother warned that grief, rivalry, and outside counsel could magnify ordinary brotherly wounds until each man saw the other as an enemy. Her concern was painfully human. People surrounding them might gain influence by keeping them divided. Harry reacted before he could speak. He removed his wedding ring, turned it between his fingers, and admitted that he had spent years hearing warnings where Diana had offered reassurance. The Duke had treated escape as proof of strength, yet her voice suggested that freedom without peace could become another prison. His anger had protected him from feeling abandoned. It had also made reconciliation appear like surrender. William walked to the far end of the room and struggled to compose himself. The prince realized that his instinct to protect private family history had helped create the silence Diana feared. Every unanswered message had seemed safer than another confrontation. Every carefully guarded memory had widened the distance. He had protected the institution, but not always the relationship his mother had asked him to preserve. Then the brothers opened the letter. Diana's handwritten instruction was direct. Neither son should use her memory to prove the other unworthy. If division came, they had to meet alone before allowing advisors, officials, or public audiences to define their dispute. Her final paragraph gave them separate burdens. William must never let the crown erase his humanity. Harry must never let freedom turn permanent anger into his identity. Charles prepared to speak, but both sons stopped him. They dismissed the monarch, the custodian, and every legal representative from the room. The door closed. Royal strategy disappeared. Only two sons remained, facing the promise their mother had asked them to keep. For the first time in years, Harry and William spoke without an audience, waiting to reward anger or punish weakness. The letter lay unfolded between them, but Diana's message required more than tears. It demanded accountability. One brother had to admit that leaving became an act of accusation. The other had to admit that silence became an act of abandonment. Neither apology could restore the lost years. Yet both men understood that refusing to begin would betray the clearest wish their mother had left. The closed door removed every institutional buffer. No relatives, lawyers, communications advisors, or palace officials remained to soften a sentence or redirect blame. Diana's instruction required direct conversation before any institution could interpret the brothers' relationship for them. For once, there would be no carefully prepared version of what each man meant. Only their own words would survive. William began carefully. Reconciliation, he explained, could not automatically mean royal restoration. That term meant returning Harry to an official working role with public duties performed on behalf of the monarch. The prince offered no promise of titles, security arrangements, public rehabilitation, or a renewed place inside the institution. Harry did not ask for one. He said the meeting had to decide whether they could remain brothers, not whether he could become a working royal again. Harry then stopped defending himself. During their private conversation, he admitted that some public attacks had been driven by a desire to make William feel the isolation he had carried. The Duke looked directly at his brother instead of hiding behind Diana's letter. He knew the impulse had been cruel. His pain explained it, but pain did not excuse it. William heard the confession without interrupting, and that silence felt different from every silence before it. William answered with an admission of his own. He had allowed caution to become emotional distance, because unanswered messages felt easier than conversations filled with suffering he could not repair. The future king had told himself that restraint protected everyone. In truth, it often protected him from confronting Harry's anger and his own guilt. Each brother had demanded understanding while withholding the vulnerability that might have made understanding possible. Then Diana's final practical request emerged from the bottom of the letter. She had left 2 blank spaces and instructed each son to write one sentence stating what he refused to lose. No advisor could compose it. No official could approve it. Their mother wanted instinct, not strategy. William took the pen first and wrote, "My brother." Harry read those words, paused, and answered, "The part of us that existed before everyone chose sides." Nothing was magically repaired, but everything shifted. Together, they approved one documented public statement, confirming the letter's authenticity while protecting its private words. Diana's purpose, they agreed, had been honored. Their silence had once invited the world to invent motives. Now one carefully chosen statement would confront a nation addicted to their division. By sunrise, the story was no longer confined to Windsor. Yet the statement released under both brothers' names contained none of the accusations the public expected. It confirmed Diana's letter, protected every private sentence, and declared that her message had led to a direct conversation between her sons. The restraint stunned broadcasters who had prepared for another royal war. Outside Kensington Palace, strangers began leaving paired white roses, one for William, one for Harry, beneath their mother's gates. The joint statement confirmed 3 facts. Diana had created the sealed message, the archive memorandum was genuine, and her sons had read the letter together. An archive memorandum was the official record documenting how a protected item was stored, transferred, and authenticated. Harry and William rejected publication because exposing their mother's words would violate the purpose of her message. The public received certainty, but not possession of her grief. Buckingham Palace responded through a separate written acknowledgement. The palace, meaning the monarch's official household and administrative office, accepted responsibility for the excessive classification period that had kept the letter restricted. Charles authorized an independent review of other private family materials, held under outdated rules. The king understood that the decision could expose uncomfortable failures, but continued secrecy would make every promise of change sound hollow. Catherine watched the first broadcast beside William, feeling relief mixed with caution. When the presenter called the brothers sons before symbols, she reached for her husband's hand. The princess knew one conversation could not erase years of accusations, missed calls, and public pain. William understood that too. Hope had entered the story, but trust remained fragile. Meghan read the statement beside Harry and recognized the cost hidden inside its careful language. Reconciliation could complicate the independent life they had built and reopen pressures the couple had escaped. Yet she told her husband that protecting Diana's private words was the right decision. Harry heard no warning in her voice this time. He heard support. Then one image captured the morning. The London Chronicle published 2 empty chairs beneath the headline, "Her Final Request, Speak to Each Other." Broadcasters displayed the front page across Britain, turning absence into the day's strongest symbol. Outside Kensington Palace, a young boy placed 2 white roses together while a reporter held out a microphone. "Brothers should not have to choose who misses their mum more," he said. The broadcaster repeated his words during the afternoon bulletin, and the coverage shifted. The story no longer belonged entirely to scandal. It belonged to shared grief. That evening, Harry returned to Windsor. William waited beside the archive box, knowing one decision remained: where Diana's letter would rest, and what its survival would mean for their family. Public judgment had softened. The true verdict would be delivered privately, when the brothers decided whether the letter belonged to history or to them. Diana's letter did not produce a fairy tale reunion, return Harry to royal duty, or erase the words that had wounded both sides. Its power was quieter and more enduring. It forced 2 brothers to stop treating grief as evidence in a battle neither could win. When Harry and William resealed the envelope together, they were not pretending the fracture had vanished. They were deciding that their mother's memory would no longer be used as a blade between them. And that decision was enough. Harry and William agreed that the original letter and cassette would remain inside a protected family archive, a secured collection holding private records that cannot be released without formal permission. Neither item would become public during their lifetimes. Each brother would receive an authenticated copy, an officially verified duplicate whose contents matched the original exactly. Diana's words would survive, but no newspaper, broadcaster, or palace official would own them. Charles entered as the revised custody order was placed on the table. That order was the signed legal instruction determining who could control, access, and preserve the material. The king read every condition before adding his signature. He finally accepted that protecting the monarchy could not mean controlling every painful truth, especially when silence wounded the very people the institution claimed to protect. Harry faced his father without anger, disguising what he needed. Forgiveness, he said, would require time, consistency, and direct contact. not messages carried through aides or carefully managed public gestures. Charles accepted those terms during their recorded private conversation and offered no defense of the past. The monarch then closed the archive box with both sons standing beside him. The gesture ended his control over Diana's message and began his responsibility to respect it. William and Harry left the room separately, but separation no longer meant abandonment. The brothers agreed to speak again within 1 month, without advisors, cameras, or official demands. Nothing had been magically repaired. Trust would have to be rebuilt through choices repeated long after the emotion of that day faded. Yet their relationship had finally been removed from the machinery that had gained power from their division. Diana's closing sentence remained private, but its meaning was preserved in their documented agreement. She wanted her sons to understand that love was not proved by defending her against each other. Love was proved by refusing to lose each other in her name. Harry's frozen reaction now carried its final meaning. He had not discovered a secret attack on the crown. He had discovered proof that his mother understood the loneliness beneath his anger long before he could name it. The document changed no succession law, the rules determining who inherits the throne, and restored no royal role. Its victory was human. Harry reclaimed Diana's message from suspicion. William chose brotherhood without abandoning duty. Charles allowed truth to replace control. The archive door closed. The letter remained private, and the conflict it had been written to prevent was, at last, no longer stronger than the brothers themselves. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.